What's up, y'all? My name is Kyle Kurzall, and this is the Automate Me Please podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in today. As always, it is a pleasure to hang out with you guys. We are so excited to get into today's topic. We're going to be talking a little bit about typical automations versus AI. I think it's good for us to kind of get into some of the distinguishing factors between the two and maybe talk a little bit about some history without getting too nerdy. So with that said, again, my name is Kyle Kurzall. I like to describe myself as your go-to guy for AI and automations to help you save time and grow your business. And I am joined by my two lovely co-hosts today, Emma Duncan and Mike Jackson. Emma, if it's cool, we're going to kick it off with you. We want to hear a little bit about who you are, what it is that you do, and then Mike will let you do the same as well.
Yeah, I'm a fractional COO and a transactional coordinator for investors all over the United States. And so my team is kind of that one-stop shop when it comes to administrative side of your business. Coming to this podcast to really learn and grow so that I can support the investors that I am hired to come in and help their team.
Yeah, my name is Mike Jackson. Only one of us, by the way, Kyle, is lovely. I am not the lovely one here. But thanks so much for having us on with you. I'm based out of Austin, Texas. I'm primarily just a real estate investor. I primarily focus on creative deals, sub-2 and seller finance deals, moving into some co-living properties. And as it relates to this podcast, I'm always interested in the new tech, right? AI and how it can impact our business. So, by the way, I think that you should probably introduce every single podcast episode, Kyle, because that went a whole lot better than it did the previous week.
Well, we iterate, right? We get better. We take what we did, we try something new, and we're just going to keep doing that every time that we meet. I think this is just going to get better and better as time progresses. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you guys again. I love hanging out with you guys. For those who aren't aware, these are some of my friends from the Day with Pace that we had back in December 2024. So we just have continued to chat with each other, and we thought it would be a good idea for us to get together and share our own expertise and knowledge and figure out how we can grow together. So that's what the podcast is all about. It's not like a super formal thing. Before we get too far into it, I want folks who are listening to know, we don't try to pretend like we're super experts by any means. We are learning and we're growing with you guys. But as we are learning things, we want to share that with you. So that is our heart in all of this. And with that said, I think maybe we should kick it off for the day. I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe some of the stuff you guys had been learning on the side first, because it's been about 2 weeks since we last talked. And there have been some crazy developments. I don't know if you guys have been watching what's going on in the news, but man, things have just, even over a couple of weeks, changed drastically.
They're changing every day, aren't they? That's what's so super cool, I think, about the whole AI and tech where we're at currently, right? Is it's constantly changing. Now, Kyle, I could guess as to what you're referring to, but why don't you just feed us a little bit more? What are you referring to, like the VO3 stuff? What are you referring to?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big things for me, was seeing what Google did with their new VO3 product. For the listeners who aren't aware, essentially VO3 is a tool that helps generate AI-powered video. And the really cool thing about that was that it wasn't just generating like the visuals, but it was even generating the audio. So like you could put in and say, oh, I want to generate this old timey scene of somebody sitting at a bar and them conversing in ye olde English, and it would spit something like that out of the person speaking. You could give it whatever phrases you want them to say, and it looks really realistic. Like we are starting to bleed over into reality. And it's a little scary, but also really exciting, because I think it gives people like us a lot of additional power to do things that we couldn't do before.
Emma, have you seen the new VO3 videos. So it's crazy. I saw a podcast with, I think his name is Greg Eisenberg, and he had someone on his podcast, and he was, the guest was, he was creating videos for his social media, and he created this one video that was a spoof on a prescription drug commercial. And did you see this, Kyle?
I did. It was hilarious.
Hilarious. And you couldn't honestly tell the difference, whether it was AI generated or human generated. And what was so interesting to me was the fact that he said that before he got into the AI and tech business, he was making videos for pharmaceutical companies, and it was costing the pharmaceutical companies like $500,000 to $1 million to create these videos. He created this in a couple of days for $500, and it is incredible. I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah,
so,
Emma, you got to go check it out.
Yeah,
it's scary good. Now, there's obviously, like anything, early stages. There's little artifacts and defects here and there. Like sometimes it doesn't always come out perfectly, but when it does come out good, it's like, oh man, this is real. So I think, with some of this VO3 stuff, the idea that came to mind for me as, us being entrepreneurs is like, well, man, like what if we could do our own like ads, like video ads, using something like that, or what if you needed some like specific B-roll for your content online and it didn't exist, but then you could just generate it out of thin air. Like, man, how powerful is that? And you could do it in a couple minutes. So that to me was what kind of stood out as potential use cases and why I was really excited. But there was another thing. So I don't know that many people know about this, but there's this image generation model called Flux. And it's been known for the last couple months to be one of the best out there. But they just released a version, I think it's like 1.1. I might be misspeaking slightly there, but it's like Flux 1.1 context, and it's context with a K. So, they got to be clever with the naming, obviously. But the really neat thing about this image generation model was that you could have it swap out very easily pieces in your scene or change over a scene and keep certain elements very similar. So like some of the examples I saw was like a woman reporter standing in a busy city, and then they said, all right, make this scene snow, and you could see the snow falling around and the snow falling on her, and it was like, man, this looks good. And then another use case I saw was like somebody showed like a guy wearing a jacket, and they were like, okay, I want to make this jacket look like a product placement, like you would see in an online store. And so they said, take the jacket and make it look like a product setup with a white background and everything. And it took the jacket right off of him and it put it onto that background, and it looked like a product display.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my gosh, that is incredible. So imagine if you had, tons of pictures of tons of different people or outfits or something like that, and you wanted to put them in your store and show like how these things could be combined. Or let's say you had some items in your store and you want to do the reverse. You want to put them on people in pictures. Like, you could do that kind of stuff too. So that was another one that like was on my mind, Mike, since you asked, like, and I'm just like, man, this happened in a couple weeks. I know they've been working on it for a while, but it just in a few weeks.
Cal, just think too, if you combine them. Sorry for interrupting you. But if you combine those two, if you combine Flux and you create this image and you put that image into VO3 and you go, look, create a video around this image, it's going to take all of the content from that image and just go wild. I mean, that's what's so cool about this. I saw someone this week, and what they did is they went onto Google Maps and they did like the street view on Google Maps. and they took that image and they put that into, I forget exactly where they put that into, but they created a video scene out of it. Maybe it was Via, I don't know. But what they're basically saying now is that you no longer have to go on site to create videos. That's kind of where this is going, right? You can go to, I did one with my friend yesterday where we went to Paris. We went to the Eiffel Tower, and we had the Eiffel Tower in the background, the cathedrals and the buildings and all of the stuff on the sides. And we built this whole video around it, and we didn't even have to go there. And we put ourselves in the video. It's just so interesting how you can implement this stuff.
Wow. That's awesome. Emma, have you been playing with any additional AI tools since we last chatted? Have you been playing with the prompts? Because last time we were talking about how to write a prompt and stuff.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things that I've been doing is you had shown me that in ChatGPT, you can choose the different versions that, the 3 or the 4 or the
models.
The models. Yeah. And so that's something that I've been really working on. I think about what I'm needing first, and then I choose which one. And I feel like I'm getting much better at prompting it, but I'm also getting higher quality because I'm choosing the right model to ask the question to.
That's great. I was just using ChatGPT for a video the other day to actually generate like little badges for my visuals.
Yeah.
And it worked out pretty good, like, because I was like rotating it around. But the more you learn about how to use those models, the better results you're going to get overall.
Yeah.
I spent, I hate to admit this, but I pulled an all-nighter. I think it was Thursday night into Friday morning, and I got sucked into the Cursor AI world.
Oh, dude.
And so all that I was trying to do is build a landing page, but I'm no techie. I don't know code. I don't know anything. And Emma, I was able to build this landing page that there's no way I would have ever been able to build this any other way and look the same way without Cursor AI. And all that I did was I said, look, this is what I want to accomplish. Give me some ideas on how we can implement this into an engaging and converting landing page. And it just went crazy.
Wow.
It was a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, Cursor is great, y'all. Also, Windsurf is another really popular one. They're actually being acquired by OpenAI right now. They're more like, there's this term out there. I don't know if you guys have heard of it yet. It's called vibe coding. But the idea is that you're coding on vibes, on good feelings, essentially. And it's supposed to be a more, interactive experience that helps people who maybe don't know how to code put together like prototypes.
Yeah.
And then there was another one Google released actually, which isn't like a full-blown coding editor, but it's called Stitch. So if you go look up Google Stitch, what it does is it lets you give it a prompt, and then it'll create like multiple pages for you, like visuals, and you can do like a mobile view or like a web page view, and then you can get the code from it and even take it and like put it into Figma. Like it'll create like a little Figma design, so you can go in there and edit it and tweak it however you want. So like for people like myself, I'm not like a designer, but a tool like that is great because then I can look at something, kind of know, yeah, that looks pretty good, or I want some of these types of things, without being like really having these in-depth designer skills. I can use a tool like Stitch, or in theory I could use Windsurf or any of these other ones too, and throw together mock-ups, at the very least. So yeah, you guys, there's just things are getting crazy every day. Every day it's a little better, which is nuts.
Kyle, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is a big picture question, like the biggest picture question I could ask right now. So I apologize. Where is all of this going? Because it seems like everything is being thrown at us all at once every single day. Like we've talked about, there's new technology, there's new advancement. And then there are all these companies kind of coming on board, right? It kind of reminds me of when social media first came out. There was MySpace, there was Facebook, there were a couple other ones you're too young, Kyle, to remember. You too, Emma, by the way. But what happened was it basically settled on Facebook. right? Facebook was the thing for a while. Do you think that we're going to experience something similar where we're going to have all of these video platforms come out and maybe it settles with a Google video platform or something else?
Very, very possibly. I think some of this is also a matter of the investment that these large companies can put in. So a lot of this stuff is ultimately based on the models. And, you've got Google with their own models, like the Gemini models. You've got Anthropic doing their Claude models. You've got OpenAI doing their models that run ChatGPT, And so those are kind of the major ones. But there's something even beyond this, which I don't know that many people are aware of just yet. And it's just because most people don't have maybe some of the technical expertise and maybe they aren't exposed to it. But I think there's like two places we're heading with this long term, maybe three. So one is you're going to start seeing these tools like Google's, I think they're calling it Flow, and that had the Flow tool is like a video editor and it's got VO3 built in and all that stuff. So you'll start seeing these more and more of these tools kind of built out around some of these AI capabilities, and also old tools being re-enhanced with AI. So that's one place. The other thing I think we're going to start seeing is AI employees. I know there are some people who have been talking about this for a while, and I was skeptical, actually, like really up until more recently, because for me, like as a tech guy, I'm like, okay, you still have to write the prompts well, like you got to be able to break it down and give them like certain constraints. And then you also have to give them the tools, and they have to know how to call the tools. And that alone, the tool calling is a big challenge. But with a lot of the recent advancements in like MCP, and also the newer models that like O3 from OpenAI, they can do a lot more. Like they can really start utilizing these tools really well. So AI employees, I think, are going to be a big thing. And then the other place that I see this going is I think the local models are going to get better. And when I say local, I mean running on device. So Google, as a part of their big announcement, with all the other things they did, one of the things they talked about was this model that they've released that anybody can download this and use it. It's called Gemma 3N, and this model can run on a mobile device, and it is really powerful, like surprisingly so. And part of the reason it is that powerful is because they figured out how to re-architect some of the things so that they could fit these essentially larger models onto these devices and have it only activate certain parts at certain times. So that's like the summary of it. And so it makes it way more efficient and feasible to run it on device. And we're going to start seeing more of these models that can run on your device, not out in a server somewhere, and be good enough for you to be able to use day to day, like your own, almost like your own personal ChatGPT. And you're not having to share your data with anybody. It's running like on your machine. So there's a lot of implications for like privacy related services, like things that are need to be HIPAA compliant or whatever. Like that's going to be a big deal. We're also going to start seeing those types of things fine tuned towards like medical services. Google's already doing that. And it's going to be good. And that's the crazy part. So those are the three things, I think. And there might be more, honestly, like we're going to start seeing AI that can improve itself. Google's already doing that. Like they improved their servers by, I think, like some of their services by 1% recently, which is incredible for how large they are. So yeah, that's some of the stuff, Mike. You open the can of worms, but that should give people who are listening a really good idea of where we're headed. Like we are headed on this trajectory of massive growth and very fast. Like in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to see some incredible changes.
And we're going to see changes between this podcast and the next one, which we can guarantee. By the way, Emma, I love you taking notes when Kyle's writing these things. I think
I need to look that way now. Oh, this is a good idea.
I know. I'm secretly doing the same thing, but underneath the screen, I'm going, I think that's a really interesting segue into the topic for the day, Kyle, but also you posted something this last week that I thought was really interesting to bring up here as well, if you're comfortable doing it, which is AI capable of underwriting real estate transactions? And I thought that was a really interesting post.
Yeah. Yeah. You want me to get into it?
If you want to, I'm always interested to learn about this. You're the expert here, so I would love to hear your opinion.
So I think that whole video started with a post from another Sub2 member, and he was talking about how he was using ChatGPT's deep research mode to do some like quick analysis of properties, essentially. And I was going through it, and I was like, to every person who commented on that post, I was like, be careful. Do not trust ChatGPT to run mathematical calculations for you. You will shoot yourself in the foot. And that was just because GPTs are not meant to do math. They just don't run math calculations like we do on a calculator. And it's because of their architecture. And so I was like super skeptical. I was like, man, this is going to mislead people. And so what I did is I took a second to step back, and I was like, you know what? Like, I don't know a ton about how deep research mode does its thing. And so I'm going to go prove this wrong. Like, I'm going to go show that this is not how you should use it. And when I started digging into it, I found out that while deep research mode is using the new O3 model, the O3 model can actually run mathematical calculations because it can execute code. And it also does like multi-step reasoning. So, it doesn't just like in one shot take your input and give you output. It's going to like iterate on it. And so I was like, well, dang, those are kind of like the fundamental things that you need to be able to do to start being able to do underwriting. Like at its simplest level, if you're just running some mathematical calculations, like it can do that as long as you're providing it the formulas. And so I've shifted my perspective a little bit, actually. And now I actually think, yeah, you could potentially use these models if you're using the right model in the right way to be able to do some of these calculations for you. I'm still a little hesitant about some of the comping stuff because comping involves like being able to look at pictures, look at distancing on a map and stuff like that. So those aren't available as tools yet, but and I did test that a little bit, actually. Like I tested the map issue, and it didn't quite work so great for that, but yeah, that's kind of where I landed on it. And so I think in probably the next year, if the tools are developed properly, you could actually have like an AI underwriter, at least for simple things, for sure. And then for more complex things, I think it's just a matter of time and developing it out, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I did is that I had a screenshot or a PDF of an underwriting that somebody had done on the project for me. But I didn't actually have the spreadsheet, right? And so as things were changing, I couldn't go in and make those changes on this underwriting. And so I dragged it into ChatGPT and we asked it, like, can you create a spreadsheet for me that has the same concepts that's being used in this PDF? And on the third or fourth column, to show me the math that you're using in each cell. And then I was able to take that and pull it off of ChatGPT and have it on my computer. And it, so far, it's showing that it's comping it correctly. If I ask somebody else to comp this property, it seems like it's the same thing. It's a simpler format for me to understand versus this huge complex, 20 different columns, 20 different rows, math that somebody else is using. And I was surprised. When I told my husband that I did that, though, he was very skeptical. And when I explained to him, I was like, well, I'm not making ChatGPT do the underwriting for me. I'm asked it to create a spreadsheet, and I'm the one implementing the information into it moving forward. So as I have other people test this and just say, hey, like, what would your, what is the COC on this, and what do you expect the first year of return to be on this? Then if they can hit the same numbers that I'm getting, I feel like he was able to create a spreadsheet that I can manage, I can handle mentally moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to use it, Emma, actually, is because you're able to evaluate it, right? Like, you're able to double check that it makes sense. And with all of this, I would just say, never 100% rely on the machine, like, early, because we're in such early stages. Like, you should just double check, right? Like, but I'm sure it helped speed you up.
It did. Kind of talking about the same topic of underwriting, one of the investors that I am working with, they have a whole bunch of wholesalers that send them deals, right? And they were asking if there was a way to have them submit via a form and have an automation that does a quick dive into what was submitted, if it's even worth their time doing the underwriting and the comping of it. Do you have any suggestions in relation to using AI automations in the contracts?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think this kind of moves us now into our distinguishing terminology here. So first of all, I think we need to understand, like, AI is a type of automation, right? Like, so if you're using AI, you are using automation in some way. But there is this, I think, divide that we need to kind of be aware of between a typical automation or a traditional type of automation versus AI today. So a typical automation is going to be something that was programmed to be done in a particular way, in a particular order. So this is how we've done automations for a long time now, from the time that, the first machines were invented, running literally binary code that people put in, up to the more recent programming languages, like Python is one of them, and that I like. The neat thing about those traditional automations is that, when you are leveraging those, they're going to behave the exact same way every single time according to the way that they're programmed. And so if you did a good job programming it, if you did a good job writing your tests for it to double check that it is giving you the right types of outputs, then you can run that over and over and over and over again on the same types of inputs and always get the same type of outputs. And so it's very reliable, and it's also very fast. So for your case, Emma, like, I think it depends on whether or not you use like a traditional automation versus AI. It depends on how flexible you need something to be. And then it also depends on how complex it is. So the whole reason that machine learning became a thing in the first place was, well, not the whole reason, but a big part of the reason that machine learning is what it is today is because we took the paradigm and we shifted it. So traditional programs, you would have some set of rules that you program, and then you give the program your data, and then you get some answer on the other side. For AI, that's kind of mixed. It's twisted a little bit. So with AI to train these models, you give the AI the answers and the data, and it learns the rules. And so the reason that distinction is important is because that means that the AI can handle very complex tasks that would be very difficult to program. A good example, a really good example of this is image generation, right? Like, imagine how complex a program would have to be for you to be able to take in some text and then create an image out of all the possible images that could be generated, right? Like, especially if we're trying to emulate reality, how difficult would that program have to be? It would be impossible for somebody to write that. And so an AI is really good for that, because instead of us having to program in the rules explicitly, we can just say, well, here are all the examples of data, the potential answers that you could come up with, and then here's all the input that could complement those answers, and then it figures out how to understand the implicit rules in the system. So for a situation like you're describing, Emma, it really kind of comes down to how complex are those calculations to do. And I think in most cases, you could probably create a typical automation for those. But AI is now starting to get good enough with these additional tooling that I think in some ways it might be preferable actually to leverage AI. It just depends on what you have available today, you know? So I think we're going to start seeing the shift from a typical automation to using something like AI for something like that. And this is something I played with recently. Like I wrote my own little tool, and I gave Claude Desktop access to the tool to run some mathematical calculations. And it did it, and it did it well, surprisingly. And then it gave me an additional analysis and everything on top of that. So does that answer your question? I tried to piece together a couple things here to give hopefully some baseline understanding.
It answers the question
as you're
now,
thinking through
is
these.
it possible? I think the next step that, like you're saying, is what do I have access to? So looking at the platform, like it's an online form, that they'll be using. So does that get plugged into the CRM? Does the CRM have automations that I can already use? Am I going to need something to like Zapier to make that possible, right? So it's kind of like, it sounds like it's doable, but now I need to do a dive into what I have and what I need to get that up.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just a matter of, like tomorrow, the tools could be different. So today you may start one place, and then tomorrow you may be like, you know what, like we can make this better.
Yeah.
Like,
and you wouldn't know that you can make it better unless you're willing to follow the news or listen to a podcast like this, right? Like, we can get completely lost in everything else that I'm doing. I'm just, the system is working the way that it's working, but I don't have the knowledge that I can make it better and buy back even more time and improve our systems unless I'm doing the research or listening to Kyle and gaining their knowledge, right?
yeah.
Or you can just work directly with Kyle.
Sure.
Yeah, or other people, because there's so many that, I know in our community, it's hard to maybe find some people who have my exact skill sets, but like they are out there.
Yeah.
You just got to go to the place where they're at and then connect with them.
So Kyle, in our business, we're all kind of in the real estate space. And of course we have, fingers kind of everywhere outside of that too. But in terms of the real estate space, And let's use the underwriting example. I think that Emma, your use case is fantastic, right? You create a spreadsheet using ChatGPT or whatever, and then you iterate it, right? You make sure it's running correctly, it's calculating correctly, and then basically all you're doing at that point is putting in inputs into that spreadsheet, right? The difference that I see, and Kyle, tell me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like if I go to ChatGPT and I say, hey, go underwrite this deal as a co-living space, that's very different than it is to take that spreadsheet and put a couple inputs in there that you got help from AI to help you underwrite that deal. Is there a distinction there?
There is a little bit, but I think it's just a matter of how we frame it in our minds. So as we're thinking about AI and what it can do, you should think of like the spreadsheet as the tool. So the spreadsheet is the tool that does the calculations. The AI is the thing that can leverage the tool. It can, based on your conversation, figure out what tool needs to be used here. So imagine a situation where you are doing potential underwriting on like maybe 10 potential different types of exit strategies. I don't know if there's that many. I haven't counted in a while. They keep increasing though. So let's say you want to take this property, you want to potentially examine a bunch of different exit strategies. Well, like you could create a spreadsheet for each of those, right? Like maybe they handle calculations a little differently, and each of those is like a different tool. Well, you want to say, hey, AI, like here's the information in general about this property. Now go do those calculations for me. And then it figures out, oh, well, I need to take this input and I need to put the input into each of those spreadsheets or those calculators. And then when it gets the output, then it can do additional formatting. You can display it in different ways. It can give you additional analysis or whatever it is. So you should be thinking about, like in Emma's case with what she did with the spreadsheet, think of the spreadsheet as the tool, and then the AI is just the thing that interfaces with the tool. And so the cool thing about this means that we can use AI to help us build tools, and then we can also use AI to use the tools, which makes it fundamentally different from traditional programming.
This, I don't know about you, Emma, but this all feels very, I'm like bordering whether it's over my head. I'm kind of like, I might have a foot on the stair that's going up to that level that is over my head. Kyle, in terms of how novices need to kind of view this in terms of AI versus automation, and then maybe eventually we get into AI automation. What are some of the basic things that we would need to know so that we at least take a step up in our learning?
I think having the fundamental understanding that AI in its current form, and when we say AI, just so everybody kind of is tracking along with us, we're really mostly referencing like these LLM technologies, these GPTs. So ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is. Like that's what most of us are talking about when we say that, because there's other categories, like there's other things you could do, right? Like for example, you could do image recognition or something like that. So AI is the new tool that essentially has this flexibility built into it that allows us to have reasoned conversations. And that can also be used to call additional tools. And so you need to have those pieces in your mind as you're thinking about AI in the future. And especially like, I mentioned AI employees, for example. You need to be thinking about it like that. So in our last episode, we talked about how to write a prompt and the importance of giving AI context, so think about, just like you would with a person, if you were teaching a person to do something or having a person do something for you, like you would do with an employee, you have to give that employee context. You have to give it information. And you have to do the same thing with the AI. You give it information. You can reason with it. You can talk to it. It's an interface. And then you have to also give it tools, So like with a real person, if you hired a real person to be your employee, like your personal assistant wouldn't be able to do anything unless you gave them access to tools to do things. So unless you give them access to the calendar app that you're using or your CRM or whatever, they can't actually do anything. All they could do is talk with you all day. And so it's very similar with these AI. You can talk with the AI, you can give it context and all that, but until you start adding the tools in, that's, it's not going to be able to do much more. But once you add those tools in, it becomes super, super powerful.
And you give us some specific use cases at the very basic level of how we can start to utilize some of these automations.
Yeah. So I think we're at the point with AI specifically where we can start using them for more personal things. So I'll give you a really good example that I did over the weekend. I needed to know where so we've been watching Sonic the Hedgehog lately as a family, and I was like, man, where can we find Sonic 3 to watch that together? And so I went into ChatGPT and I turned on the web search tool and said, hey, I want to know what platforms are Sonic the Hedgehog 3 streaming on. I want to know where I could buy it if I needed to. Like, just give me all of the information. And then it went out and it was able to search the web for me and give me all the different little platforms that Sonic was streaming on, where I could buy it if I needed to. And then it was even able to give me a little extra information that I didn't ask for and tell me that, oh, you can go to this one platform and get a free trial and then watch it for free. So that is like a really simple example, but it kind of showcases how I was able to talk with the AI, and then I was able to give it access to the web search tool. And because it had those things, then it was able to go take an action for me. And so you could start to see this being really practical for things like personal assistants, voice AI receptionists. You could do this in theory with underwriting, like we've discussed. You could have it analyze emails and categorize emails, maybe auto respond in some cases, or escalate to you if it's not something that it should be able to handle. You could do, systems where you can have a knowledge system where like you give it all of your SOPs, your playbooks, your strategies, everything, and then you can ask it questions interactively. Like the list goes on and on and on. So the AI is able to take advantage of already existing typical automation as tools to be able to perform actions. And so in some ways, for the people, it's to your advantage to maybe in some cases start with typical automations for certain pieces of your business, like walking through your processes and automating those. And then you can start adding AI into the mix to be able to use those automations more interactively.
The possibilities that you can use these sort of workflows, automations, AI, all of it, are absolutely endless, right? And I think that, for me at least, the second that this kind of clicked with me, it changed the way that I start to think about things, right? And I don't necessarily want to, I want to remove the repetitive tasks from my day if it's possible, right? I want to, if it takes me 30 seconds to read a full email, how cool would it be for my email to summarize it and I can read it in 10 seconds? It's a 20-second time saver, right? It's not huge, but it helps me. GHL, Go High Level, is already building in these sorts of things into their platform, right? They're starting to market their AI employee. And so how does something like that work for the average database user?
Could you expound your question a little bit? So how does it work? What do you mean by that?
Better, yeah. So to clarify, you mentioned before that AI employees are going to start to become much more common. And since Go High Level is marketing their version of an AI employee, I guess very specifically to Go High Level, what could their AI employee do?
Oh man, it could do almost anything that you could imagine inside of Go High Level. That's the thing, is because they built out the base tools, you could essentially have an AI employee that can do everything that you would need it to do inside of Go High Level. So, there's no limitations ultimately, aside the limitations just come down to how well trained the models are that they're using, and how well written their tools are. Come again?
And the idea is that you can also come up with and implement that in a specific way.
Yeah, exactly. So it all comes down to like how creative can you be, and then the access that you have, right, to certain data. And so this is a good reason why, like, I tell people when they're building out their business and they're trying to figure out like where does automation and AI fit into all this, you should probably just start with your base systems, like for example, like Gmail and a Google Workspace. Start with your base system, start with your CRM, things like that, and start by documenting your processes. And the reason is because if you know your processes, if you can define your processes, then you can create an automation around that. And it's either whether it is a typical automation or whether it is AI, and you can figure out where to slot that in. So if you have those in place, you're in a good spot, I think, to be able to grow.
This is a great meme, by the way, looking at Emma's screen. It's like Emma's little one isn't quite ready to hop on the AI train yet.
Focus on fighting with my brother a couple of weeks. So we'll get into AI.
So Kyle, what's next then? So do we need to dive any deeper into AI versus automation at all, just to clarify?
I think I'll add one last short thought, and then I think we can probably wrap it up for today's episode. But one way to kind of think about AI is that it is an abstraction or an interface to the underlying machine, ultimately. So if we look back in the history of computers and machines, we had these really giant machines, these giant server rooms just for these machines that could do simple mathematical calculations. And you have to go in and pull all these toggles and essentially like represent like binary in an analog way. And then eventually we added this abstraction layer with assembly languages. And then we added another abstraction layer with some of the first programming languages like C or Fortran or whatever it is, right? And then we added another layer with some of these more interactive languages like Python. And now we're adding this additional layer of AI. And AI is just, in my mind, almost another programming language. It's just more flexible. So it can understand our human speech, and then ultimately it can translate that into operations that the computer understands under the hood. And so as we progress, we're going to be able to then leverage everything else below it. And that's why this becomes an exploding phenomenon in terms of innovation, is because we can then use the tool to write the tool. And that concept isn't really brand new. It's actually been around for a long time. It's just been harder to write it because the skill involved and the time involved to have a tool write a tool was really complex. But now these tools, since they can understand human language and then understand the outcomes we're looking for, it's just faster. It's just faster. It gives you more accurate results. It's more flexible. So anyways, it's an exciting time to be alive for y'all. And for folks who are listening, I would encourage you, don't be afraid. Don't fear it. Don't get overwhelmed by it. Just start learning. Just take a little step and learn another little thing. Think about how to upskill your own skills and expertise, how you can incorporate it, how you can make yourself better, how you can buy back your time with it. Just start looking for ways to implement it, because ultimately technology is a force multiplier and it's made for humans. So I think this is a good place to wrap it up, you guys. Thank you for joining me, Emma. Thank you for joining me, Mike. It was a pleasure, as always, to hang out with you guys. And I'll end it here by saying, if you've been watching us and hanging out with us today, we have a form down in the description below where we would love to receive some feedback from you on what you enjoyed about our session today, maybe some things that you wish that you would have heard that we would have talked about. Please go fill out that form. Give us some feedback. We want to take that. We want to iterate on it, and we want to get better. So I guess we'll end it there. Again, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Mike. It was a blast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Kyle.